Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going above and beyond the call of box office returns to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole Finari, and with me today is...
Adam Perry.
Welcome back, Adam. It's been a minute. What movie are we going to overanalyze this week?
This week, we are going to overanalyze Captive State.
All right, so directed by Rupert Wyatt and co-written by him and Erica Beanie. The film follows a young man played by Ashton Sanders who participates in a conspiracy to rebel against an alien race that has invaded Earth and enforced strict martial law on all humans. Also starring John Goodman, Jonathan Majors, Machine Gun Kelly, and Vera Farmiga. What did you think?
I thought the movie was good.
Okay.
It succeeded as a science fiction movie, I thought.
Okay.
Where, you didn't really care about characters so much, but the plot was such that you just kept moving along with it. And so overall, I liked it. I think my wife put it the best when we got out of it. It was like 80% really great, which made you almost like overlook the 20% that was not good.
Basically the first third of the movie.
Or just the acting, I thought, was the real problem.
Okay.
Like, the two brothers in particular, but it seemed like almost like a mumblecore movie where they were just say the script to the camera and just keep moving it along. It doesn't matter. Like, when have you ever seen John Goodman that restrained in anything? Like, it just seemed like people were just talking to the camera and the plot was like what you came to see.
Yeah. So it's gotten really bad reviews from the critics. It's very low Rotten Tomatoes score. I did not like the first third. There was a lot of introducing of things that went nowhere.
Yeah.
They went nowhere. They didn't really substitute for character development. So it was like, why was there the guy in the boat? Like, it had nothing to do with anything. Like,
yeah, this, boat is, it was, it couldn't decide whether it wanted you to, not care about the people, I feel like, in the beginning of the movie, so they throw in this, the brothers,
the
supposedly
girlfriend who cares
deceased.
about the girlfriend? Yeah,
they have this, plan to escape to wherever the aliens are, and then the movie, kind of picks up, and you get sucked into just, the world more, and I feel like that's when it really got good.
So, the minute, they started to develop... So the basic plot, there's a resistance cell and they're plotting to do some sort of terrorist act against the aliens. And so once you move into the world of okay, we're going to carry out this terrorist plot, I was super gripped. Yeah. I was into it. I was yeah, how are they going to get away? I was definitely a little bit on the edge of my seat. I thought those scenes were well filmed.
The score, too, in those parts was just, kept
I
you
loved
going.
The
it
score.
It was so good. Even when it was something stupider, I can't think of, a specific example right now, but when you, kind of were, lapsing in the story, the score really kept you in the movie.
It really did. I agree. I made a note about how good the score was as well. There was a little bit too much shaky cam for me.
Yeah, I feel like that might have been, part of, the budget constraint. I don't know. It seemed like they were trying to, force it on you, that this was the style of the movie, but it just kind of came off like you had to do that. I don't know. I'm really susceptible to, the motion sickness aspect of shaky cam, so yeah. I was please stop. Yeah. Just hold the camera still. I'm getting sick over here. And I did think, again, to the whole, heist, I thought the editing was really tight. I thought it was really, once it got going, I was I'm really into it. I thought the editing was tight. I thought, the shots moving between the different elements was really well handled. And, I was a little bit taken aback when I went to read all the reviews and people's were so negative. So I haven't read a single review for
Okay.
this. I know the score isn't great, and I know it wasn't even supposed to be a wide release.
Okay.
And they decided, I guess, at the last minute, so it's focus, do movies like Lost in Translation and stuff like that. So
yeah.
I was kind of surprised when it was this kind of effects heavy sort of genre picture they were putting out. But I knew it wasn't well received. It didn't make money, but I didn't read any of the reviews. What were people saying?
Just that it was very uneven, which it was. They felt like not enough was sort of explained. And then this is the interesting thing, which I really liked about the movie, and then everybody else criticized. So the budget issue was like forefront in everybody's mind, and they were like, they cheaped out on the not having the aliens.
I thought that was great.
Me too, because it always looks stupid and fake. I'm like, I'm so glad that they just really, kept it much. It wasn't a creature movie. Like, it didn't need to be Attack the Block. Like, that's not what it was trying to do. And less like janky, like CGI, the better. Like,
yeah, and like I feel like you were touching on there too, like less was definitely more in this case, where what they did show you, to me, it only made me wonder like more about this species of alien, and more about, like, it seemed like the people who wrote it did a lot of work that you don't necessarily see in the movie, but that makes, like, what you do see makes sense. For example, like when, like, you see the alien in the beginning and it's basically just all like spikes, and then later the only other time I think you see them is like it turns out that it's like a suit.
Yeah. And
they're all underground. You never see them. There's just all this stuff that's implied that you don't see. And I thought that was probably the biggest strength of the movie, was that they don't over-explain. There's, like, exposition in the movie, but, like, it's, like, the crummy acting. Whereas, like, the world they build, there isn't much exposition other than the beginning, where you have the obligatory, like, crawl, like, 10 years ago, blah, 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 like that. But, like, after that, it's strictly, like, very, like, of the moment, I thought. And there wasn't a lot explained. And, like, some of that I feel like was to the movie's detriment, where it's, like, you're just sitting there thinking, like, this doesn't make sense, but most of the time they pulled it off, where it was just like you had to think about what was going on rather than it just like being a bunch of stuff that didn't make sense. I thought that was like one of the movie's big strengths, was it didn't like
over-explain.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree. I mean, I remember when we did The Quiet Place, and, Stacey was like, oh, of course they have the mandatory whiteboard where it's all laid out for you. Like, she's like, that's such an annoying shot in every movie.
Yeah, it's like, I like that movie, but you're right.
Like, I mean, it's a legitimate criticism. I still like the movie, too. I agree with you. The performances, like, they kind of didn't know what to do with those people.
It was just the weakest element of the movie. I don't necessarily think it was, like, anybody's fault necessarily, other than like that the script was like basically directing characters around the whole time.
Well, and I thought too, like, they're trying to, so, we're going to spoil it. There's like a big reveal, which I saw coming a mile away. Like, I'm sure you did.
I'm interested in what you think this is, like, what the reveal was.
That John Goodman was working for the Resistance all along.
Duh.
Yeah, like, I assumed that from the beginning, that they were going to have that twist, so that part. But then they're trying to kind of keep it like, will he, won't he? Like, what's his end game here? And so then his scenes with, like, Vera Farmiga were, like, really stilted and didn't make any sense. And you're like... Yeah. And then they don't make sense when you think back on it either, once you know for sure that they are on the same side, which kind of sucks. I'm like, they didn't really know how to handle that.
I think they did, like, a decent enough job with that, because, again, it is, like you said, extremely predictable. But I thought parts of it worked to the point where it's just, like, another thing that didn't bother me, because the movie was almost, like, just so very economical in the way it proceeded that you're just, like, kind of sucked into this thing. It was, like, almost more like, I hate to sound corny, but it's more like you experience that movie. Like, it's not, like, anything spectacular, but you're really, like, if you're sucked into it to the point where it's, like, that kind of stuff almost doesn't matter. Like, the whole beginning thing, too, where it starts and the guy, like, the main character, if we're going to call him that, the kid, the kid who works, that was another thing I loved about it, is, like, the digital tech destruction. Like, that's his job. But it's like, they really kind of like, why was he involved at all? Like, I didn't understand that.
So his job is they live in this surveillance state, and his job is to get every piece of information that's out there, like, off of every memory chip.
And then, like, destroy them.
And then, like, upload it to the cloud so that they have 100% complete surveillance and then destroy it. So I thought it was funny, too, because at the end of the movie, you know, John Goodman gives him, like, a chip from this phone, and he watches it, and it's a video, and then you see him, like, should I upload this or just destroy it? And I'm thinking, like, back to Independence Day, that it has, like, a virus or something on it, and I was like, oh, definitely upload it, and then he doesn't do it, and I was like, oh, was that not where we were going with this? I guess I saw Independence Day, too, recently.
Well, that's what I liked about the movie, too, is, like, I feel like, not to get, like, too deep, but what happens in this movie is definitely what will happen during a real alien invasion, as opposed to Independence Day, where, like, every country bands together to fight the aliens. Like, no. It's going to be the people in power rolling over and trying to make the best lives they can for themselves, and this will just happen. I thought that was, like, very accurate. I was like,
yeah, I mean, and
that kind of ending wouldn't make sense, like, in this movie. I feel like in the world this movie made, it would have to be, like, the revolution, like, succeeding or not succeeding, I guess.
Yeah, and so kind of getting more into that, and unless do you have anything more you didn't say about the cinematic elements to move to theme?
No, just think we touched on everything.
Okay, so the other criticism the critics had is, like, they didn't seem to see the point of the movie, and I'm like, again, it could have just been a good ride, but I think the movie had a definite point, and I think its point was, like, very targeted to the times of saying, like, look how much people really just want authoritarianism.
Yeah.
Like, how much they really are willing to put up with a surveillance state. Like, they want a strong leader, even if the freaking leader's an alien. Like, like they're, you know, so that, you know, at the center of the movie, the sort of big central plot is that they're gonna commit this terrorist act at this quote unquote unity rally.
Yeah.
Taking place at Soldier Field in the movie set in Chicago. And, you know, everybody's there, like, cheering for, like, how great it is to be American under occupation rule.
Well, because they don't show up on Earth that often, and that's, like, the big hook, is that the aliens are going to make an appearance at that point in the movie.
Right.
Do something.
Right. But then it's like, why are all these people in a stadium cheering? Like, the movie is, you know, the movie gives you the point of view, like you said, like, not only do the political leaders just cave for their own reasons, but the populace just seems to accept that this is all for the good, and they go to a unity rally. Like, they fill a football stadium full of people at a unity rally. Like, why would you go to a unity rally for your occupying force?
I mean, I feel like that's, like, what the majority of people would go along with and do, though.
Yeah, I think that's, like, the point the movie is trying to make.
Yeah, because you see, and I credit to the movie, they definitely could have driven this home way more, where they kind of present stats and, like, how, like, things have improved in society, like crime and jobs. And, you know, people, your average person sees that and it's like, all right. And it makes sense, you know? And, like, that's another thing that I feel like could have really been, like, overblown and, like, over-explained in this movie, that they just kind of, like, hinted at. Like, just the fact that it sticks with these, like, on-the-ground characters, and you just, like, assume that there's this, like, whole class of people that, like, went along with this because there just would be. It just is.
Yeah. I think that's right. And I think I found it so bizarre that people didn't talk more about that. And I thought, you know, there was a good, one of the podcasts I listened to, I think it was a Radiolab, but I don't remember, where they were talking about, like, they do surveys every year, and, like, every year there's a significant and oftentimes growing portion of people who want authoritarian rule.
Yeah.
Like, they want a dictator in America. Like, they want, like, the whole point of America is not, like, to have a dictator. And I'm just like, and, you know.
They probably just didn't like how, like, true to the times it was. We just smush down our emotions about how we feel like this is very realistic and be like, there's no point. So they couldn't handle the truth? Could that be a conspiracy? like everyone just hated seeing themselves.
I mean, I was, you know, like, I was thinking about, so you have these people who are in the resistance, right? Like you have the people who are not collaborators. And you have, so the sort of resistance cell that you see, you have, you know, the brother who's kind of the de facto lead, the figurehead, I guess.
Yeah.
He doesn't seem, they do try to make it like a leaderless cell, sort of.
Yeah.
You have a prostitute former teacher, right? You have, it's not clear, you have a queer character, right? You see him in drag
that
at
guy,
one point.
yeah.
You have a defrocked priest.
And then there's like some kind of like, he's like not quite an insider. Like the guy who, after the attack, he's about to get caught and he tries to jump in front of the train and they get him. Like, what's that guy's deal?
That's the guy who was queer.
No, I thought he just got shot beforehand.
Okay.
Because this guy had like a whole family that they were threatening.
Oh.
And that's why he didn't kill himself, because he knew what would happen to them if he did. And he kind of like sold the rest of them out. That's why they go around rounding them up, I guess, during the last like third of the movie, I want to say. I forget what he did. He was like some kind of insider, not the newspaper guy or whatever that guy was.
Yes, there's a
Ferris
journalist.
Bueller's friend.
Yeah. A vet. Also Ziggy from season 2 of
Yeah,
Blair.
I love that guy. Deputy. From
And you have
Sinister.
like a female mechanic.
Yeah.
And so you're sort of, I was thinking like you're sort of giving people who were either disaffected, right? Like a vet or, you know, a minority.
Yeah.
Or you have people who were outsiders already, you know, like who are, so I was, you know, like who are the people who are drawn to be in the resistance?
And then some of it is vengeance based too, because I guess like it turns out that John Goodman was friends with he's his partner, the kid's dad's partner. So it's like that motivation, I guess, too. I
never got that sense. I got the sense that it was
like watching
the right thing to do.
The kid's guardian angel, the whole movie.
Although, you know, one of the plot points, and I've complained about this before, so I'll complain about it again, is that they capture, you know, the older brother and they use that, you know, they torture him to get the little brother to act. And the older brother, of course, is like, don't say anything. And the little brother's like, no, make sure he stays alive.
Yes,
and I'm like, you joined the resistance for a reason, man.
Yeah.
Like, come on, little bro. Like, I mean, again, for the record, if I ever get captured and tortured, let me die. If it's for a good cause. Yeah. Like, you don't negotiate with terrorists. Like,
I think, like, and I agree with you that theme is just, every time I see it, it drives me crazy. But I do think it does speak to the weakness of humanity that is very accurate. That people will do that despite, if they can think logically, that, like what you said, is you should just like let them kill him and let the movement continue or whatever. They won't actually act on that in real life. And I feel like that's true, you know?
Do you?
Yeah, I mean, I've never been in that situation, so I don't know for sure, but I feel like it's, you know, people are emotional and overall, in my opinion, not smart. So I feel like for the most part, they would do that, you know?
Yeah.
And again, it is very annoying because I sit there thinking the exact same thing. Like, don't. I just said don't.
Yeah, I mean, the whole point of,
It's like a selfish thing almost. It's like what you want, you know, like.
Yeah, you're absolutely not thinking about the greater good.
Yeah, well, that's nothing more human than that, right? Like, that's...
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I had a conversation with a friend about this not too long ago where I was saying there are plenty of cultures that think about the greater good and are more, like, community-focused. Our culture is not one of them.
I was about to say.
I had a couple of Russian friends, and we were like out at a happy hour night, and I was just like, you got to admire the Russians, man. You take an elementary school hostage, and the Russian government just blows up the school. Yeah. Like, you take a movie theater hostage, they gas everyone inside. like Chechen rebels were getting nowhere fast on that front. Like, I'm like, terrorism doesn't work when the government's just totally willing to sacrifice civilians.
Cool.
And I'm like, that is not our culture. Our culture is all about sending in a SEAL team of 6 people to go rescue one person and then 3 people die.
And that's, again, why I think it's propped up as admirable in our art. Like, I feel like you're supposed to see that the brother he's like, I'm going to do what I have to do for my family. Like, that's supposedly noble. It's framed like that it's like an ethical choice, you think, that it's like a little bit like maybe he shouldn't be doing this, but it's mostly like presented as the noble choice, like the hard choice. Like, that's like almost like his humanity right there. And in most movies, what's going on is that it's the choice you make and the right one, even though it's just clearly not. But I'm with you. I would definitely just like try and think. I mean, I don't have siblings that can be used against me, or like a lot of close family for that matter. But it's like I would think that, like, I would like to think
You're married
that
now.
Yeah, it's true. But it's like, if they're specifically telling you like don't do this, like it's that's to me is like what you would do.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think it's interesting that you put it that way, and it's maybe inadvertently something the movie kind of bolsters its point with, of saying like not only will people like authoritarianism, they're willing to sell out their civil liberties, but they're still at the end of the day like they're so unwilling to sacrifice for the common good.
Yeah,
and they're so willing to make an arbitrary line of like, well, I have to protect my family.
Yeah.
And anybody
Absolutely.
who makes that choice ends up, like, the opening scene, right, is the cops, they're trying to escape Chicago, like, where the heck they're gonna go? Like, the whole Earth is taken over by, like, with an alien.
It's like, we have a chance if we get away from the rabble, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, he's a cop, he's trying to violate the rules, and it's like, well, I have to save my family.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what about everybody else's family?
Yeah, could it be that the point of the movie is just all of our flaws? That's like what they're trying to show us.
Yeah, I think they're very much trying to show that our worst impulses come from a very recognizable place.
Yeah.
And that, you're right. Like, if somebody promises more jobs, more safety, and we're willing to lose our freedom just to get that.
Yeah.
And not question it. And we're also willing to turn on each other.
Yep.
To get those things as well, just to protect our little family or patch of land or whatever it is we think that that's ours.
Yeah. That's cool. And I thought, I don't really remember, you'll have to remind me, if the movie talked about what was going on elsewhere in the world. I don't know that
there were closed zones everywhere in like major cities all over the world.
Pretty much the same deal. Like they've taken over, and we're just
seeing
how the Americans are reacting.
Yeah, some sort of like resource extraction thing. I mean, it's implied that their cell is one of many, though.
Yeah,
and that in other cities around the world. So then that sort of leads me to the ending. How did you feel the movie concluded?
I feel like it was like a little bit of a have your cake and eat it too kind of moment where I guess it was over the credits, they detail what's going on after. So it ends with John Goodman has been revealed to be
a sleeper agent, a double agent.
And they have this kind of weird tech that is invisible that they used earlier in the film that he covers himself with and I guess presumably bombs the Chicago, whatever center of alien activity that is. And that kind of like sparks revolutions in other cities. So it kind of implies that we rise up against the aliens after this like one act, which I feel like wasn't like entirely in keeping with the movie.
No, there's a little bit heavy-handing in the messaging of the resistance that says like, just all we need is like one spark to light a match.
I totally forgot that line. Yeah, light a match, start a war. It's like, okay. I feel like someone could have came up with a better line than that, but saying the same thing. But yeah, you're right. I liked it. I mean, how else is a movie really going to end like that? I thought it was a great, like, final image. I thought that really worked. How just, like, that's, like, the last thing you see in the movie. I thought the video that he gives the kid was kind of dorky. I mean, I didn't really need that, but, you know, it didn't ruin anything for me because, again, the whole movie was like a very, you know, visceral experience to begin with. So I don't care that this like character got closure. It doesn't like, it wasn't horrible, so it doesn't ruin anything for me. But I thought overall it was fine. You know, like, again, like, how are you really going to end a movie like this?
I mean, one of three ways. Like, happy ending, the aliens are defeated, right? Independence Day. Sad ending, we're never going to overcome. And then, you know, option 3 is sort of which I think they try to walk a line of option 3 of like ambiguous ending. Yeah. Like, what's going to happen next?
Yeah. But like, you also like kind of know. They want you to think like that, I guess it was successful.
Yeah, I think they do. They want you to think that like this is going to shock everybody out of their complacency. Right? It's going to ignite this fire and everyone's going to realize like, no, maybe we can take these aliens and we're going to fight back.
Well, another thing I really thought was cool about the movie that this like one plot line they really didn't touch on that much, but I feel like was kind of like once heard them talking about it, you kind of had that in the back of your mind, was that these aliens were taking resources from the Earth at such a rate that the planet was going to either like, I don't know if it was like from the center of the Earth, but that it was going to be uninhabitable in some way. Mm-hmm. And that these, I forget what they call like the mayor character, whatever their title was, that these people...
The legislatures?
No, I think that was the aliens.
Okay,
but like
the human representatives.
Yeah, their term for whatever they were like in on it, under the understanding that they would get to leave and go somewhere like better. And that was going to be like their prize for collaborating with the aliens. And so I thought it was kind of interesting, kind of like talk about that and then only hint at it like later in the movie. And then you can kind of maybe assume that when they commit this bombing at the end of the movie, that might be what is the public has to reckon with. Like the people who have collaborated or just gone along with the aliens now have to confront this fact that they're, in fact, that they might not have known that they're taking everything from the planet, like kind of moving on. And that is another thing that shocks them out of like their complacency. They didn't say that in the movie, but I feel like that's like kind of was at the back of my mind when the movie ended, like a reason why I would maybe believe that people would, you know, stop acting in their own self-interest. But then again, that's kind of happening with the environment now, and we're not doing it. So I was going to
say, like, you're bringing that up, and it's like, well, that's exactly the situation we're in. And you have all these people sounding the alarm, and have been sounding the alarm for a long time, and basically...
To hell with it, yeah. It's like out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, we're ignoring it, and we're not doing anything, and we're not putting anything in place to stop this.
Yeah, which could be another, I guess, just like another point of the movie that is like of the times is, and I almost think it was like kind of clever the way they like almost barely mention it, the way most people barely pay attention to the problem that we have now, you know, is like the people just don't care about the stuff that they should care about, you know.
Well, and you're right in the way that they framed it. They've set it up, you know, I talked about this previously, my complaint that, you know, everyone keeps talking, the only changes anybody wants to make to the environment is having me recycle more. And it's like, no, it's not a consumer-driven issue. It's a supply, you know what I mean? Like, it has to come from the industrial end. Yeah. Like, I can't solve it by, like, being a really good consumer. Like, I can't solve this problem.
Yeah.
No one can. And so you sort of, the movie does, to your point, like, bring up the fact that the aliens, the authority, in this case, like, they're just going to mine the earth for resources. It's all about their economic gain. And then there's a whole host of the political class that goes along with it because it gives them power and lines their pockets. And so they have no incentive.
Yeah.
Like, they've made a plan so that this doesn't have to hurt them.
Yeah.
And so they're happy to go along with it. And I think it's another aspect of human complacency against terrible problems. Like, if it doesn't affect me, then why do I care?
Well, so you read about all these, like, rich people that have, like, crazy bunkers and houses that they're gonna ride out and they know it's coming, like the apocalypse or whatever. Like, that's their plan. It's like the same thing. Like, however long I can hold out, like, with as much luxury as I had in the good times or whatever, it's like kind of the same thing.
It is, and one of the first things they did at the EPA was shut down the EPA's environmental justice shop. And environmental justice is not talked about very much when people talk about environmental movements, but it's the one about people, so it's the only part I care about. And it basically says, like, look, Flint, Michigan's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that a poor, mostly black town lost their water supply. Like, high pollution plants go up in poor neighborhoods. Yeah. Like, rich people do not have to suffer through any of the things that poor people do, or people with less political power. And again, the Trump administration came in, and that's one of the first things they shut down at the EPA is any research on environmental justice, which is kind of quietly unnoticed. And it's really depressing. And the more, it's funny because there's sometimes where we've over talk a movie, and the more we talk about it, like, the more the problems start to sift to the top and the less I like the movie. But I feel like the more we talk about this movie, the more I'm like, wow, it has some really good points to make. Like, and it seemed to have gotten no credit for that.
Yeah. Which I just think is people don't want to be confronted with this stuff. I think it's like either, I don't know if it might be, they think they just didn't like the movie, but subconsciously I think there is that aspect of, like, a movie like that where it's just, like, too real in some ways. Where, like, familiarity breeds contempt, like, I could see that being the case here. Again, it's like it's funny you should mention that it's like this movie that is kind of slight, almost like popcorn genre entertainment, but that stuff is all just there. And I think the reason that it works so well for what we're doing right now, which is talking about it, is none of it is, like, beaten into you at all. It's like, it's a movie where the story is the story, and you get all that out of it. It's not, I'm certain they had the times in mind when they wrote it, but it's almost, like, subtle, like, when you think about it.
Yeah, it's definitely subtle, and it's
no winking at all, I guess. Like, there's no, like pull of, like, the viewer to see it as, like, a parable or anything.
No, and in a year, or coming off of, the Green Book Oscar win, it's like, and
didn't see it, don't care.
Yeah, we didn't either.
No desire to.
All the freaking Marvel movies, and it's like, no, we just want a simple story of good versus evil. Like, we don't want to have to think about our own complicity. We don't want to have to confront anything. We don't want subtlety. Like, Disney doesn't do subtlety.
I do think that is probably a reason for the lack of success of this movie. And it's disguised in this, I guess, again, I didn't read any reviews, but it's like the point of the movie, the structure of the narrative, with this, like, all such surface complaints, I think, that hide a dissatisfaction of the message. maybe.
Yeah, and I was trying to think too about, some of this movie's analogs. I mean, this isn't a new storyline. Was it Falling Skies? The one with Noah Wyle?
Yeah. The show.
Yeah.
There's tons of these.
And there are tons of these, but I think if you think about Falling Skies or Independence Day or any of the others, you're right. You brought it up earlier. All of those are about, the Earth banding together to fight the alien occupation. And this one is like, no, we're just going to capitulate immediately and be happy about it and have freaking unity rallies in football stadiums.
Status quo, right?
The old I, for one, welcome our new alien overlords.
Yup. That's great.
Simpsons doesn't get enough credit for its satire sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay. Any final thoughts, words?
So, I watched all this director's other movies before this podcast, and
Planet of the Apes, right?
Yeah, so Rise of the Planet of the Apes is probably the best movie he's done, and I noticed a pattern.
Wait, that's 1, 2, or 3
of the new ones.
Yeah, I don't remember
It's the one with James Franco.
Okay, I don't remember. It's like Rise, Dawn. It's like they're similar enough. It's hard to tell.
It's the first one where
got it.
So the director, I think, excels at these kind of stories where the characters are kind of secondary. Mm-hmm. Like his first movie was a prison break film called The Escapist. Pretty good. For a like tiny budget, but great cast. Like Brian Cox is in it, and he wrote the movie because Brian Cox turned him down for like another thing. He's like, I'll be in your thing when you write me like something better. He's like, all right, but it's basically like a Currents on Owl Creek, but as told like as a prison drama. So like that's the way. But anyway, he makes these movies where the plot keeps moving quickly enough so that you're like swept up in them and the world. And I think this was probably like kind of the apex of that style. Like it was, or pinnacle, I don't know what word to use here, but it was like the trajectory at its highest. Mm-hmm. Is the only movie he did that was, in my opinion, not good was The Gambler with Mark Wahlberg, which is like a character study, and I don't think it's like anybody's fault, but he's like a rich, privileged son of this dynasty in LA, and he's like a gambling problem. He's a professor, and it's like not interesting because the movie is about a specific character. And I don't know if that's, necessarily like the director's fault or like something he can't do. But when I watch the other movies, it's like, it's interesting that that's like the weakest one, is this character driven story. Mm-hmm. And I think that in Captive State, which was this movie after The Gambler, that maybe there was this like kind of like conscious decision to return to that kind of storytelling where you don't focus as much on the characters and you kind of sketch them out, but it's all in service of this propulsive sort of unconventional movie that isn't long and covers a lot of ground, which we didn't talk about earlier, but I thought that was one of the most successful parts of the movie. It's like an hour and 40 minutes long, and you feel like a lot has happened in this movie that isn't over 2 hours. Yeah. And I don't have me, I love long movies.
And I hate them.
But they do not all need to be, I would side with you only because I feel like more movies are long that don't need to be. Right. Whereas it's not enough to make me want to give up the long movies that I love, but it's like I can definitely understand. It's like an understanding of people that disagree. But so, that was like my last thought. Like I was kind of interested in doing that because I love Rise of the Planet of the Apes and these other movies. So I figured it'd be kind of fun, Yeah. With this movie that, again, did not get a lot of buzz or make a lot of money.
I think I will say there are better ways to do, and he did it better in Rise of the Planet of the Apes. There are better ways to do that than what he did in this one in terms of like, he couldn't commit to not having character development. He couldn't really commit to just saying, these are the people and this is the world they're in and I'm going to move them around like pawns. I think anytime, like you said, he strayed out of that, the movie was not successful. But once it was just like, it doesn't matter who they are. Yeah. Like, it just doesn't matter. That's not the point of this movie. It's like, you're along for the ride.
Yep.
And, you know, there was a very definite larger point to be made about the faceless masses who just go along.
Yeah.
And that maybe, you know, I was looking for trying to pick apart why he chose who he chose to be in the resistance. But maybe I was overthinking it in terms of like, maybe that's not the point. The point is it could be you, it could be me.
Yeah.
Or we could easily be one of the people standing waving a flag in Soldier Field.
Absolutely.
Like, there's nothing special or remarkable about on either side.
Yeah. And that's another thing I feel like we're just now touching on is how the lack of characterization in these people is in itself like kind of impressive like that, because when you do see these movies where it's like people rise up, it is always like a hero story. And in this, that doesn't matter at all. Right. It's nobody. There aren't any, you know, it's just the world is like a meat grinder and you're just we're all along for the ride. There aren't any exceptional people.
So on that note, pulling it all together, social impact score from 1 to 10.
Well, after our discussion, I'm going to have to go with like the 8 to 9, just because there isn't really a lot of stuff that kind of condemns everybody like we talked about, that isn't either really heavy-handed or in the end kind of lets them off the hook, sort of. So I would say it's like an impressive little movie that I hope kind of becomes discovered at some point.
Yeah, like has an afterlife.
You know, and I think the genre of it will help in that regard. But yeah, 8 or 9, definitely worth seeing in the theater too. Absolutely.
I'm gonna give it a 5 because it isn't doing well. So I can't count on the fact that it's really gonna have a huge impact because.
Yeah, I forgot to factor that in.
Yeah, that's okay. You make your score however you want. So, but I agree with you. Like coming into the podcast, I was thinking definitely leaning towards a lower number. But now that we sort of fleshed out so many good things that are in it, like, yeah. So we will make our fame by being the rare people who really like this movie.
Yeah, let's say nothing more
get on the map.
Than saying we're getting it started here. You heard it here first, people. Captive State rules and will be loved eventually.
Okay. Recommendations for the week.
All right, this podcast isn't doing a movie I just saw that is incredible. It is called Us. And it's really, really good.
I'm going to recommend a rabbit hole I fell down to thanks to a friend of mine while I was on vacation. The Uncover podcast, season 2 by the CBC follows the NXIVM cult. If you have been following Allison Mack from Smallville was arrested.
Oh, yeah.
It's that whole thing that she was involved in. And this was literally like the nexus of Nicole. This was like, This thing is at once a pyramid scheme, which I kind of am obsessed about, and Scientology, which I'm also really obsessed about. They're like, it's the perfect combination of those two things in a cult. I really recommend it. I will say, like, it's pretty upsetting.
Yeah. Oh, imagine a story like that.
Yeah. It's hard to hear about people who were so sincerely wanted an answer.
Yeah.
And got duped. Okay, well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Movies That Matter. Please take a second to leave a review on iTunes. Check out our website, moviesthatmatterpodcast.com. We'll link to all the things we talked about in our show notes and on Twitter. If you want to talk to us, leave a comment on our website, on our Facebook page, or with our tag @MoviesMatterPod. And check Twitter next week to find out what movie we're overanalyzing next. And remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll see you next time.